Всем здравствуйте, меня зовут Сергей Гейло, я директор Центра развития средних технологических компаний БРВК. Хотел сейчас дать вам краткую информацию по вебинару сегодня, по формату. Пока мы еще немного подождем подключения людей, мы видим, что у нас много регистраций, соответственно, думаю, что сейчас постепенно люди начнут заходить в онлайн. Давайте тогда начнем с технических деталей. Сегодня презентация будет, разговор в основном преимущественно на английском языке. У нас есть две опции. Либо мы какую-то часть сказанного резюмируем потом на русском языке, либо там переводим ваши вопросы с русского на английский. В общем, как вам удобно. Вот если можно сейчас, коллеги, всем ли меня слышно? Да, давайте начнем с этого. Ага. Вот, если можно, отпишитесь, да, нужны ли русские вставки. Если не нужны, то мы просто продолжили на английском и не теряли бы много времени. Угу. Вот, в общем, вы пока голосуете, мы сейчас тогда технически ждем, мы даем возможность зарегистрироваться, точнее, зайти в сеть всем, кто еще хочет зайти в сеть. Тогда давайте еще 2 минуты и начнем. Okay, then. So we've gathered all your votes. Well, we don't need Russian language, so it makes it a bit easier for us, and we can ask our speakers more questions. So let me introduce myself again. I'm Sergey Geyla. I'm director of for mid-sized enterprises development support department. So in response to coronavirus infection, we started this series of webinars to help you to explore more markets and more opportunities on the market due to the new situation. So today we have a special event. I mean, today we have a special content and context, actually. Today we're gonna traditionally give you some important information about new locations. So it's going to be Singapore, about the new opportunities there, about new targets for Singapore due to the coronavirus infection. And we also gonna announced a new collaborative program with Singapore for the Russian startups. So RVC is going to be the single point of contact for the Russian companies who's interested in Singapore market and would like to get some investment and expert support there. So we launch with our colleagues from IFK, Sistema, and Sistema Asia Capital a new program. And today, Jeremi Энг is investment manager at Sistema Asia Capital, and hi Jeremy. So
hi everyone.
Jeremy is gonna give you some insights about Singapore market and the opportunity that Sistema Asia Capital can provide the Russian companies with. And also we're going to be accompanied by Darья Luzina. Darьya is a program manager at SalesJet, a business development platform backed by Sistema Asia. So in this case, we got a partnership with this platform, and we're gonna give you some details about that in the end. So let me pass the board to Jeremy. So Jeremy, the screen is yours.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
So hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Jeremy. I'm the investment manager at Sistema's Singapore office. As many of you know, Sistema is one of the larger investment companies in Russia, and we have several VC funds in Europe and Asia. So we are sitting here in Singapore looking after deep technologies in the region. So perhaps just let me introduce a little bit about myself. I was previously investing on behalf of a VC fund in Shanghai, and I've been involved with a few unicorns that were listed on the US stock exchange. Right now, I invest in advanced technology in APAC for Sistema Asia. Here with me today is Darья, who is also the program manager of SalesJet, our business development platform.
Hi, everyone.
For advanced technology. So she had previously worked in India's largest technology incubator and also a fintech innovation arm of a major bank in Singapore. So together, both the fund and the business development platform will help companies expand in Asia, and she'll perhaps tell you more about the platform later. So I guess today's chat is really to introduce why Singapore is a great platform and a great launchpad for technology in Asia. So I'll give a quick rundown of the insights into the country and economy, rather than giving you statistics that you can easily find on Google. So don't worry about this being a lecture. I'll make it as interesting as possible. So if you look at the first slide right now, this is a picture of Changi Airport, one of our latest addition to our 50-year plan for infrastructure development. It's also the first point of contact for most tourists when they come to Singapore. I'll touch a little bit about that later on as well. So if you follow me to the next slide, I believe some of you have traveled to Singapore before and some have not. So it might be surprising that Singapore is only 50 kilometers wide. We are quite a small island and economic miracle, some might say. So 50 kilometers wide, you can go from east to west in under an hour. So our population size is only at 5.6 million, but we have one of the highest GDP per capita in the region and in Asia, at about $65,000. And we churn out a GDP of more than 300 billion every year. So this is roughly about the size of 20% of Russia. So, but of course, this was only possible with several key factors that I will touch on later. So just to give you some context, this is where Singapore is. It's about 10 to 11 hours direct flight from Moscow. And as you can see, we are 5 hours away from major Asian populations. We're talking about China, India, and Southeast Asia. These regions alone cover a big bulk of the global population. So as you can see in this radius, China, India over here. So let's talk a bit more about Asia's high growth markets. So we have previously mentioned those three regions. China right now, of course, the world's most populous country, second largest economy, and a growing tech leader. We've seen companies like TikTok coming out, taking market share in the West as well. We're seeing a lot of growth in the AI space, and of course, a very rapid growing industry that's providing a lot of tech unicorns right now. India, on the other hand, the world's largest democracy and second largest country in terms of population. We are seeing a huge growth in middle class. And of course, we do know that India has been a very great supply for large tech and IT labor force. And then finally, ASEAN, or some may call Southeast Asia, which consists of 9 to 10 different countries, Singapore included. It's one of Asia's youngest population. So for Indonesia, for example, with 260 million people, half of that number is under the age 25. So we are seeing a very young population coming out with growing middle class, and of course with that, there's a strong leapfrogging of technology. A lot of countries in the region over here did not have landlines or PCs that directly jump into mobile technology. So this is the phenomenon that we are observing here in Singapore and in Southeast Asia. So if you take a look at the kind of growth we are talking about, those three regions that I just mentioned will continue to grow and is expected to take up a huge proportion of global GDP. If you see over here, Asia and developing Asia, if I might say, is likely to contribute the largest GDP proportion by year 2025. And with that, Singapore really is at the epicenter of all this activity. So now, let me touch a little bit about the Singapore context and why we are really the gateway to Asia. So first of all, Singapore, since colonial times when the British had their hands on Singapore, we have been a very crucial part of the global trade system. So we are right smack in the middle of the global trade route between the West and the East. So cargo coming from the West will have to pass through the Straits of Malacca to Singapore, and then eventually to the rest of the East, to China, to Japan, and to Australia. Now, this has given Singapore a very good chance to develop its seaport. Right now, it's number one or number two in the world. Of course, we are constantly competing with countries like China for their in Shanghai and in Hong Kong. Right now, we are seeing like the largest volumes of trade cargo coming into Singapore. And this is made possible because of our highly efficient port system and logistics system. So it's highly digitized. If you can see in the image, a lot of these cranes that are operating at the port are already fully remote controlled through a central command center. And then because of the scarcity of land in Singapore, we have no choice but to be very efficient and have an extremely high turnover of cargo at our port. That being said, Singapore is also a major air travel hub. So as we know, we have the world's #1 airport. We have seen Jewel at the top of the presentation just now. Singapore is also a major transit destination for air travel, and we have one of the leading airlines in the world, Singapore Airlines. As such, major aerospace companies such as Rolls-Royce, Honeywell, has set up shop in Singapore to provide servicing for their regional fleets. So besides that, Singapore is also well known as a financial hub. Why is this so? Just to give you a little more context, about 10% of the foreign exchange daily traded volume flows through Singapore at about 640 billion. With that, if you look at the global trading volume at $6.6 trillion, a lot is coming through Singapore, and it's largely because of a very strong infrastructure that we have, the strategic position, and of course a robust political stability that a country provides. So we are seeing a lot of wealth management funds. We are seeing a lot of commodity trading companies also situated in Singapore. So over at this slide, you can easily see why Singapore is at the epicenter. This is a submarine cable map that connects data centers around the world, telecom centers around the world. So if you can see, cables coming from the west will have to flow through to Singapore as a major junction. Cables coming from China, Korea, Japan also comes down to Singapore. Likewise from Jakarta, Australia and New Zealand. So Singapore is really at the cross junction where a lot of this communications happen. So Facebook, for example, has a major data center in Singapore. So in this image, you will see this is Facebook's proposed data center that will be built in Singapore. It's the first that they have in APAC, and it's going to cost more than $1 billion. So being such a small country, we have readily established ourselves as a dynamic data center hub. And with that, we have been able to support the growth of tech unicorns in Southeast Asia. So Singapore is one of the birthplaces of tech unicorns, and we have the most tech unicorns in Southeast Asia. So increasingly, the government is planning and executing a large infrastructure development throughout the country. This is, of course, to fulfill our 50-year plan of being a smart city. We are looking at a high digitization of government services. Right now in Singapore, all government services are on the same platform with a single login, including military service. So for example, I serve in the military, which is compulsory for all Singapore male residents and citizens. So with this digitization of infrastructure, we are seeing growth in fintech areas as well, digital health, digital finance, and in different parts of Singapore, we are building infrastructure that are sustainable. We are talking about smart buildings with enterprise level IoT to optimize energy. We are talking about technology that will help reduce manpower needs in Singapore because we are such a small country. So Daria will touch a little more about some of the government digital programs that we are currently running here in Singapore. So with that, we have in Singapore, we have all these ingredients for a very stable investment environment. And that is also why a lot of funds have chosen to position themselves and station themselves here in Singapore with a very strong backing from the MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is highly regulated. So we see a lot of hedge funds and trading companies in Singapore as well. But as we know, VC and PE is relatively new to the space. In Asia, technically less than 20 years old, unlike in the Western markets. So at the moment, we see Singapore having an AUM, asset under management, about $19 to $20 billion. And most of the funds are sitting in Singapore, if you can see it from the chart. So this consists of about 200 different funds. We have larger PE funds focusing on traditional businesses, and of course, most recently, a lot of new VC funds focusing on technology. So now let's talk a little bit about the kind of tech unicorns that have sprung out in Singapore over the last 10 years. As I mentioned, the tech space is still very new in Singapore, unlike Silicon Valley, but we have been able to show very strong growth in the region. From this slide, except for Agoda, every other company here is 10 years or younger. So maybe I will spend some time to run through some of them. So Agoda, many of you should know, is one of the biggest hotel and flight booking platform, have been acquired by Priceline. Grab is a major ride-sharing company that has now diversified into other verticals, also backed by some major governments, SoftBank, and several other big institutional players. Lazada was one of Southeast Asia's largest e-commerce company. They have since been acquired by Alibaba a couple of years back, but they still continue to function autonomously in Singapore. Razer, if you are a gamer, you might be familiar with this brand. So Singapore is also the birthplace of Razer, a hardware company for gaming. Together with Garena is also a major gaming distributor or publisher. Garena since has been renamed as SEA, and they have started e-commerce as well. Now Shopee has become a major player in the space, fighting with several other main e-commerce players in Jakarta as well. So Garena and Shopee now are collectively known as SEA. They are also listed on the American Exchange. Zalingo, our newest addition as a unicorn, is also in the e-commerce space. So as you can see, a lot of companies here have been around the consumer angle for tech in general. Bigo Live is a fast-growing live streaming platform for emerging markets. And of course, you have Trex, which is not really in the mix in this group of companies. They are a computer vision company focusing on retail clients. So out of all this, we are still expecting more unicorns to come into the market in the next couple of years. If you follow us to the next slide, here are some of the other fast-growing tech companies. I'll take some time to run through some of them. We have Shopback, an e-commerce related platform. Ninja Van, a smart logistics company. Carousel, a consumer marketplace that sells secondhand, that started selling classified space for secondhand goods. VSense, a computer vision company that's in several of the major smartphones already. They do visual search on the smartphone. MyRepublic for telecommunications, WaveCell, Advanced.ai. Some of these companies here are in deep tech. Together with Tiger, PetSnap, they involve a lot of automation and artificial intelligence for fintech and other applications. And of course, we have a more traditional fintech coming out, Validus, funding societies. You could easily find more information about some of these companies, so I wouldn't go through all of them one by one. So as you can see, in a short span of time, in less than 10 years, Singapore has provided the environment for a lot of these companies to grow. And now I would like to pass the time on to Daria, where she will touch on the intricacies of the Singapore market and why it has been possible for these companies to grow. And of course, I'm giving you some examples of some Russian companies that have also successfully done so. So Daria, I'll hand this over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Right, so of course, currently the most pressing situation in the world, everywhere, including Singapore, is the COVID-19 outbreak. and it has been occupying the minds of government, businesses, and just simple citizens. And what Singapore has done during last few months, just within 4 months, Singapore government released 4 budgets. The last one, Fortitude, was released just yesterday. And all these budgets in total amount 93 billion US dollars, which are devoted for the support of enterprises, families, and various institutions in Singapore. So 93 billion dollars, it's around 20% of country's GDP. So it's quite a large amount. And this amount, it spreads along different initiatives and different measures of support. So, for example, of course, there is finance and cash flow support in terms of income tax rebates for 2020. Of course, it's some measures regarding property tax, which is some qualifying entities don't need to pay property tax for 2020. It's rental waivers for qualifying companies. And of course, it's enhancement of various current funding and support that government gives to companies. For example, there are additional support measures for fintechs, as they are providing a lot of loans and short-term debts to society and to businesses. Banks were also providing measures to support their customers and the businesses in terms of loans and different prolongation of the term of the loan payment. As well, apart from financial measures, there are manpower costs that government helps companies to cover. So it's co-funding of salaries, it's foreign worker levies, it's additional funding for traineeships. So currently, if companies want to hire interns, they will get co-funding from government. It's also employee training support. So for those industries where the employees are currently not engaged a lot, government provides training so they can spend time on that. As well as for those industries where there is a lot of need for employees, the government provides additional training. So there are few industries that, of course, were touched by COVID most hardly, and this is aviation, tourism, land transport, maritime, art and culture. These industries receive additional measures. For example, the Singapore Airlines that Jeremy was mentioning was the largest airport in the world. These airlines, they are receiving quite substantial financial support from the government, as well as they are helping to deploy the staff that is currently not engaged, the airline workers, to various different alternative roles, for example, even as nurses or administrative staff during COVID. So, of course, government also was supporting the population and businesses through digitization. And here it's important to mention an organization called GovTech. It's a government agency of Singapore, and this agency is responsible for implementing various tools and digital IT measures in the digitization of the society and of the government. For example, there is a SingPass portal or My Info portal. It's something that's provides opportunity for people in Singapore to communicate with and to make transactions with 60 different government agencies. So it can be paying taxes, it can be searching for jobs, it can be even what Jeremy mentioned regarding to his army services as well. So this organization has a good digital infrastructure and engineering capabilities to launch quickly various measures. And they launched several tools that will support fight with COVID-19. So on the slide you can see, for example, FluGoWare. It's a portal where you can citizens can find public hospitals, and they can see where they are located and where currently there are subsidies for people with respiratory diseases. Government as well launched various channels, for example, through WhatsApp or Telegram, to provide the most recent and accurate information about the outbreak. And this includes 4 different languages that are used in Singapore. There are, for example, there was also initiative to provide masks to the citizens, and that was also possible to find the nearest location for where you can receive your mask through the portal called MaskAware. Another one is the one that I am using quite often, is called Safe Entry, and this is something which helps to check in digitally to any shop or any essential services building that you are entering. So you can just scan QR code and enter the building or the shop, as well as you can scan your ID card, and again you just enter, and the information is stored about you entering. Other measures include Trace Together, which is the Bluetooth-enabled app that allows contact tracing between people, so the distance and the amount of time they were contacting other people. Mentioning GovTech, it's also worth mentioning the Smart Nations SG, which is global Singapore initiative that is targeted to make the economy and the society as most digital as possible. And there are various strategic national projects that already were launched, including the SingPass, the digital ID that I was mentioning, and as well as some digital payments, as well as, for example, Healthify 365, the digital portal for health, which had some interesting examples of initiatives like National Steps Challenge. So that was something that was encouraging people to have healthy lifestyle, and so people would, the steps would be calculated, and of them walking or doing some exercises outside, and there were even prizes devoted for those who did more steps within a particular amount of time. Talking about Russia and the business opportunities of Singapore, of course, it's worth mentioning recent agreement that was signed between Singapore and the Eurasian Economic Union. And this is a free trade agreement, and it allows now for companies from respective countries to have tax reliefs for particular exports. And so this agreement, for example, can help Russian companies in the following way. If the Russian company wants also to leverage the free trade agreements that Singapore already has, it's worth to launch the branch in Singapore, and like that it can leverage the FTA with ASEAN, with China, and with India, but also with other regions, even Australia and New Zealand. Overall, these agreements and partnerships are part of the bigger picture and strategic collaboration that's coming up in the eastern part of the world, which is called Great Eurasian Partnership. And you can see on the map various agreements and unions that are already happening in Asia. And of course, Russia is looking forward to engage more with Asia and Asian businesses, and to drive more trade and more exports. Apart from that, for example, in 2019, there were several MOUs signed between Singapore and Russia, which are devoted to initiatives for transport and for urbanization of cities, but also for startup initiatives, and to drive more collaboration in this area, in the innovation and startups. So apart from that, of course, Singapore is a launchpad for business, and what Jeremy has mentioned of it being financial trading data hub of Asia, it also provides opportunities for small companies and SMEs. For example, access to capital is something that companies can leverage here, and this means there are a lot of investors in Singapore, and if company registered office in Singapore and entity in Singapore, it is has a lot of chances to have access to more investments in this region. Another area, if the company in Singapore would eventually have a Singaporean citizen as a director, and a holder of 30% of the company, it also provides additional benefits like various subsidies and grants from government. What's also good for businesses in Singapore is the efficient legal system. So here it's the British law that is used. I mean, the Singapore law is based on British law, and it's transparent, and it's according to international law principles. So it's a good way for friendly business environment. As well as if you register a company in Singapore, you get a lot of trust from partners and investors from all over the region, from other countries in Singapore. And other countries trust Singapore in terms of taxations and deal structuring. Here on this slide, we can see various rankings of Singapore as being a good place for business and being a launchpad for business. So, of course, it's talent. There is a very strong talent pool, and in 2017, Singapore marked the first in the ranking of global startup talent. So it's even Silicon Valley wasn't the first at that one, and but we still can take a note that Singapore still requires more tech talent, and it can be an opportunity for other companies and people from outside of Singapore. Singapore has smart migration policies. It's also favorable for good talent in Singapore. income, and the tax rate is 17% income tax rate. So, and again, there is no double taxation with Russia, which is good for Russian companies. So most globally connected startup ecosystem, as we mentioned already, the strategic location of Singapore, it has a superb connectivity with other countries like Southeast Asia countries, China, India. And we can say that mentality of Singapore is a mix of Asian and European. So it can be easier for Russian people also to communicate with Singaporean people. It has strongest IP regime in Asia, and of course that's favorable for companies using technologies. It's the most innovative country in Asia according to Global Innovation Index in 2017. And as we saw, the various initiatives to be smart city, to be smart nation can contribute to that. And it's a startup-friendly environment overall, with various incubators and support organizations for startups. To add, of course, Singapore has high quality of life, and it's a summer all over the year, and it's a good education and medicine. What I find interesting is that people in Asia consider Russia as part of Asia, so it's also kind of friendly towards Russians. There are things to note. For example, it will take a few weeks to open a bank account for Russians here, but it's still easier than in Hong Kong. Some operational costs for business would be higher than in Moscow, for example, but still less high than in western part of the world. Another thing to note that in Asia, it's very important. The trust itself is very important. So face-to-face meetings usually are also quite important. But of course, during current situations, remote it became new thing for everyone. So we wanted to emphasize the deep tech focus, and of course Singapore is a nation that always forward-looking and preparing for the future, and that means that with the advent of Industry 4.0, Singapore tries to keep its competitive position in the world and in the region. So they are trying to deploy various advanced and new technologies in various industries and public and private sector. And the country has small size, a small market, so it's seeks to deploy and find some scalable solutions. So what we think that we can advise to the companies is that deep tech is a very important aspect to have because there are already strong players in such industries like e-commerce, marketplaces, edtech, fintech. So it's if company has some scalable software that can be integrated within various verticals, that might be something easier and more competitive to implement here. And Singapore is good also because it doesn't require much localization like other countries in Asia, like India or China, for example. Just in the beginning of the year, the government announced 300 million injections into deep tech. So the government also is striving to support deep tech implementation in the city. IP protection, I already mentioned. Overall, good example can be that For example, if company goes to China, they can protect IP and goes to other markets as well. Singapore has a strong IP protection, and Singapore is good for piloting because it has APAC HQ offices of major corporations, and country itself works as one big machine, one corporation where everything is centralized. So running pilots here would be good. Still, companies should be prepared for a long sales cycle, like minimum 6 months, to gain this trust. And companies in Asia often look to see some traction and some validated customers in other markets before trying to engage startups or like growing tech companies. What's at the same time, Singapore being advanced, the countries around it, Southeast Asia, is still developing, and deep tech there is very young. So it's a good opportunity to pilot some technology in Singapore and then to scale it in Asia with various markets in Southeast Asia. So we also, of course, wanted to share some examples of Russian companies that had success in Singapore. And there are cybersecurity players, for example, Kaspersky Lab is in Singapore already since 2015. And it was definitely a strategic decision for them to open office here. Because they saw it as access to Asia market, and as well as they had the opportunity to be closely located to Interpol's newly opened global complex for innovation, which is of course relevant for cybersecurity. Acronis was actually found in Singapore. It is associated with Singapore, and this company sees Singapore as a good place to work with government and other institutions, having clients in the form of government as well. There are other companies, for example, CDN Video, which is content delivery network, and for live streaming, game, and web acceleration. Such company, of course, benefited from the infrastructure available here, as well as the access to the region. Telegram is very popular in Singapore. For example, it's top 10 mobile apps by monthly active users, and it's used for various groups between people, for channels, chats, and what else. Of course, there are companies that worked with us as well, and we partnered with them. That is Group IB and Vision Labs as example. So Group IB is a cybersecurity company as well, and they are providing threats detection and fraud detection in the data space. And they shifted their headquarters to Singapore last year. And they are doing pretty successfully here and in the region. And this point, Singapore acts as a place for them to start internationalizing and to continue internationalizing their business. We worked with them as partnered with them to support them with their business development in Singapore and Southeast Asia. Vision Labs is another company from Russia. It's a computer vision and facial recognition company, and they see also opportunity in this part of the world. And we worked with them and supported them, for example, with hiring sales director in Singapore. So mentioning our platform, what we do, The platform that we run is called Sales Chat, and we launched this platform in partnerships with Enterprise Singapore. And the platform is designed to support growth stage advanced tech companies with sales and business development. So in Russia, we partner with organizations like RVC, Russian venture company, and Skolkovo, companies like MTS. And the program itself is a bilateral bridge between Russia and Singapore. So we support Russian companies with expansion to Asian markets, as well as helping Singapore companies to expand to Russia. So Sales Chat essentially seeks to accelerate the commercial adoption of deep tech and smart city solutions in Asia. So it's more, it's not an accelerator as such, it's more of a business development platform. So we help companies to find first clients in the region, and as well as to build a distribution network for their business in the region. And mentioning all the growth of the region and facts that Jeremy and myself was talking about, we see a big opportunity for deep tech in this region. So we outlined some areas that are interesting for us and that we think we can support with sales and business development. And this is security, city management, urban mobility, enterprise digitization, and e-health. So essentially, use of various advanced technologies across these verticals for monitoring, for data analytics, for various use of involving this for different use cases in such verticals. And additionally, as Sistema also does investment or work in the region, this platform helps us to see and to scout some companies that we can invest in. And so that's additional opportunities for companies that are looking to expand to this region. So you can always get in touch with us through our website that you can see now on the slide. You can also contact us through LinkedIn, as well as by email, and of course through our partner RVC that currently is working with us on supporting Russian companies. So it's all from my side. I'll pass the word to Sergey. Hey, Sergey. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Okay, so I can see some questions here. So probably we can try to answer some of them. So what kinds of services partnership do you offer? What is your pricing policy? We are basically helping companies with two areas, I would say. One is operational establishment of company in Singapore. So it can be a connection to various organizations that support registration of business, hiring, and so on, related to operations. As well as we provide co-working space for free for the companies that participate in our program. So that's operational aspect. For the business development aspect, we have a sales team that supports our companies with business development and that tries to find important and relevant people and organizations to speak to and to pitch the solutions and eventually to drive sales for the Russian companies.
Thank you, Daria. Sorry for being not here, so some technical issues. So yeah, as I understood, you have started to answer the questions from the chat, right?
Question.
Yeah. So dear guests, so if you got some questions, so please start to write them down here. So as for my side, so so my comment is a bit more related to Alexei's comment about information about the program. So my colleague is going to send the link right now. So as Daria told you before, we become a partners here. So we help the sales jet to find the companies, to make an initial assessment of the company, and organize a communication between the sales jet and the company. So we today we have launched the beta version of this service on our website. So here's the link in the chat. So you can so this link right now exclusively for the participants of the webinar, of today's webinar. So you can try it first. So here you can get the information about the program, about the initial requirements, and you can, if you feel that it is necessary for your company to look through the Singapore, and you got a already maybe you got a stretch and a plan to go there. So you can use this link also. So we will provide with the service and the feedback on your initial application, and then we're gonna organize your communication if everything is okay with the Singapore. Also, why we partner with this thing? So we've got a special program in being a project office of National Technology Initiative. So we've got a special program to support the technology companies in their expansion to the new markets. So if you have a technological product or service, and you feel that Singapore is going to be a good hub for you to go to the to the Asia, so we can also consider it through our requirements, and we can also offer you some options, additional options to our partner options. I mean, financial support and expert support to make it happen for you. So all the details about this support you can find on our website. So the link is in the chat, so we can get back to your questions and start to answer them. So Daria or Jeremy, so I think this question is to you. So from Igor Chausov. So can you give us a comment on this part about the energy sector? So do you feel any possibilities? Do you see any possibilities in this sector in Singapore? So does it make sense for the Russian companies with such technology to apply to the program?
Right. Perhaps I could chime in on this. So Singapore is right, and I see one question about nuclear energy. Apart from being a very small country, Singapore is also a net importer of energy. So although we do have a large LNG processing plant in Singapore, just because we are a important touch point for major consuming countries like Japan and Korea, we generally do not really have a vibrant energy market here in Singapore. Although most recently we have started distributing energy and pricing energy on an open exchange. But on that front, it's still a very new market, and definitely for nuclear energy, it's almost non-existent here so far in Singapore. And I see one question about comparison of the PEVC market with China and India. So perhaps I could spend some time on this as well. So of course we know China is a major powerhouse globally. AUM in China is roughly about 600 billion, if I'm not wrong. That's because of the sheer size and population size of China. But if you compare this to India, for example, it's still way behind China in terms of magnitude of AUM. I think they are about 30 billion. So Singapore is not too far off considering our population size and GDP size. So I think that gives you a good comparison between the three markets. And in this presentation, we did not really talk about the Japanese market and the Korean market, is because traditionally these two markets have been very difficult for foreign companies to penetrate. China used to be like that more than 5 years ago, but we recently see more receptiveness to foreign companies. Facebook, for example, China is now one of the major clientele markets for Facebook for outbound advertising spend. So increasingly, we'll see the Chinese market opening up to specific sectors, I would say, that are not very sensitive to their national security. As we see now, I think the geopolitical scene is intensifying and there are a lot of moving parts. Okay, one more question about medical equipment. Yes, there is, Singapore is also known for premium medical services. So a lot of affluent patients from abroad do come to Singapore for medical tourism. That being said, they do come here for, say, major heart bypass surgery and so on and so forth. But we are still will not be considered a major hardware equipment manufacturing hub in Singapore. But on the software front, we are seeing a lot of new diagnostic systems that are AI machine learning driven. We are looking at a lot of cybersecurity technology that protects health data. So on the software front, we see a lot more growth in that sense. Right. So next question, Darren. I think
you're more quicker with my microphone. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. So yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so for enterprise digitization, just yesterday the government has released a major push in terms of subsidies and sponsored programs for digitization. So the most direct market that is having a response to this is fintech. We're looking at companies that are digitizing in terms of internal processes, their payments, their payrolls, trading, for example, supply chain, stuff that used to be on pen and paper, on books. It's all going to be digitized very, very soon. Industry 4.0 is still, I would say, in the earlier days, but we are seeing strong growth in certain sectors, mainly around IoT. And this is at the enterprise level. Cybersecurity is also a growing market. That's why you see a Group IB also coming in to take a large market share over the last 1 year. We're looking at major banks that are also right now using their systems. Okay, are there any more questions?
Yeah, guy. So if you got some questions, we still have time to answer them. So back to the main topic for RBC right now here in this case. So what steps can I take to get it right? So I mean, Leonid, so you mean to get to apply to the program, right? So once again, you can use the link we sent upper in the chat, and there you can get all the information about the requirements, and you can fill the application, and we'll get back with the feedback for you. All right, so just a personal question from my side. So I mean, 2 questions, I guess. So what is your every organization here has its own specifics, right? And expertise and maybe focus. So just to make it clear, so what's your main focus right now, where you can provide, the company with a better expertise, with a more insight and stuff like that. So what is the best customer for you, and for what customer you can be the best? So that's the first question. Yeah, and I'm gonna ask the second after your comment.
All right, sure. So for Sistema, we prefer companies with already having an exportable product, with perhaps already traction with certain overseas markets. Right now, they just want to go bigger in Asia, and that's where SalesJet can really give the push. We don't really focus on early stage companies that have yet proven their product, or they have a solution but it's not productized and not ready to say, if I give you 5 clients right now, you can immediately pitch to them with an English deck, English product. We are looking for companies that have really gone past that stage, and they now need that extra push. And this is where SalesJet can come in to give them warm introductions to certain clients that are suitable for them. So that's one. Yeah, Daria?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there are 2 areas. One is SalesJet as a business development platform, and support for the companies with sales and with expansion to Asia. And the second is the investment that majorly Jeremy is covering. And there's a second angle that we are looking at while working with such companies. You want to elaborate a bit more on the investment side?
Yeah, sure. So for Sistema Asia Capital, we do it quite differently from most VCs. Most VCs invest, and then they hope and pray that their portfolio company grows and improves. But for what we're doing here in Singapore, it's quite different. We try to help first, and every year we select 2 to 3 companies that have performed the best with our help, and then we choose to invest in those companies. So for us, SalesJet is a risk mitigating mechanism for the fund. And we see this as a growing demand, because for deep tech, a lot of companies have that extra problem of selling and having an early adoption for the market. So this is where SalesJet will come in and perhaps accelerate that process.
So, as far as I understood, that was your comment on the Stanislav Shmakov question about pricing policy, right? Okay, so if you don't mind, we've got a question from Alexei about industrial technology. So, do you have an extra comment on this side?
Sure. We are seeing a lot of industrial IoT coming up, IoT, cybersecurity, especially more interest that revolves around 5G, right? The government is looking for technology that can drive 5G use cases. I think that's very important for the entire industry to grow in general. So on that front, definitely, computer vision right now is being used a lot. We are looking at traffic monitoring in shopping centers now for social distancing. We have a lot of traffic cameras in Singapore. So much like Moscow, very difficult to break the law without paying fines. So facial recognition is also coming up very, very sharply, with a lot of applications now directly using facial recognition for transactions. What else can I say for industrial IoT? Just because we do not have as large a manufacturing powerhouse like, say, China, there is also limitation to our market size. But right now, Sistema Asia is connecting with a lot of Chinese partners in provinces of China, tier 2 cities that are building entire industrial parks. They are digitizing their entire manufacturing facilities. So we have access to some of these big players in China who are willing to distribute products. And Singapore will act as a launchpad for internationalization, and then we can bring you to China afterwards once the product is ready.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeremy. So frankly speaking, I have to cancel my second question, since you've mentioned in your answer, the requirements for the companies, the initial requirements for the companies to penetrate Singapore. So now it's a bit more clear. I mean, your focus, and so I cancel my question so we can stick to the question from our guests. So yeah, you can see them. So
okay, so about energy, light, and leasing. So Darya and I personally brought them to Moscow in March, earlier, a couple of months back. So Energy Light is a power plant, I would say, a power plant, virtual power plant company. Basically, they provide the platform for energy suppliers, and this is a digitized platform where they can subsequently trade energy, optimize their energy. Resync, on the other hand, is a energy optimization platform for smart buildings, for entire solar parks, stuff like that. Their platform provides the entire monitoring stack to optimize, say, maintenance, predictive repairs, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I think I can add that on the website, the partners that we mentioned, the SalesJet partners, is the companies that we worked with. So it's these tech companies that we were supporting either in Russia or in Asia. And Energy Light and Resync were the Singapore companies that we brought to Russia. So they are actually, they are themselves a tech companies with innovative products. But they are looking for partners in Russia, majorly for distribution and for technology. Like for Energy Light, looks for manufacturer of devices, actually. Yeah, it's if in details, yeah. And for the question of the pricing, I think we still didn't touch on this, but to mention to the interested companies, from our side, we don't charge for the program per se. However, we expect companies to cover their costs when they come to Singapore. So be it flights or accommodation for the companies, and as well as we look at arrangements with the companies for distribution, for example, we can discuss the terms for that, and for the potential investment in any form that we will eventually decide together.
Right. I also see a question about current expected rates. Of course, this is expected rates. I would say MOIC cash on cash basis 2 to 3x market rate. So of course, some VCs will hit this number, some will exceed, some will, of course, will never hit those numbers if they do not have the capabilities to help their portfolio companies grow. All right, Sergey, over to you. I think we
okay, and so I think so we can wrap up our meeting already. So we're gonna send you the presentation with all details about Singapore. I guess this information is really useful, and thank you for update, Jeremy. Because I believe that a lot of visitors here, I mean, our guests, they know about Singapore. So, but you provided us with some update and some new information, so it's really important. And secondly, so you can start the application process, to the sales jet program. So we can be the partner here. So please use the link we just sent today, and that's it. I guess that's it for now. So let's keep in touch. So if you got some questions, you got a contact here on contact list here in the presentation, and you can also contact us. So stay safe for everyone. Thanks a lot. So keep in touch.
Great.
Thank
we
you.
have also our LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
So feel free to add us.
Yes, and as you can see on the chat box, you can also apply for the program through RVC website, cabinet rvc.ru, as well as on our website and through talking with us on LinkedIn or by email.
Right. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, Sergey.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good week.